And we are back. I took a little break and now we are adjusting our seat here. Hold on. There we go. Okay. We're back and I don't have a huge lot of time today. I was going to do this in a video, but it's so much easier to do a live and not have to do all the post editing. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to talk about trapping ourselves in a reality. I want to kind of get back through that. We're going to talk a little bit about the eclipse coming and everything that's kind of gone into getting to where we are in the year. I'm going to be doing a live, I think, on Instagram tomorrow and probably one on Instagram next week. And maybe, so if there are questions, I don't know if I'll have time to answer a lot today, but you can post them and I'll look at them at the end. At the end, we'll see what we can get through. Because I do have a heart out in about 45 minutes. Okay, the eclipse. The eclipse is, actually I did not realize we had so many big eclipses coming. And I had mentioned earlier on, whether it be on my YouTube channel or this channel, that it felt like the year was very odd. A lot of times we talk about, we get the templates for the new year in July, and we start clearing out from June to the summer solstice is a big clearing, so we can start getting the templates in. We start getting the templates in around the Lion's Gate, and we kind of have a cadence and an idea of what the next linear year is going to be, what we're going to be focusing on, what can't come with us, what we have to be ready to do. And by the time we get to the first of the year, of the linear year, even though there is no time, there technically is a cadence to the linear year. And we kind of will run through, there's a cadence to the linear year. They all have a theme. They all have something we're working through, a main focus in every year. Realities we're focused on, what we're going to be working through. We kind of have an idea of what it's going to be. So we kind of are used to that. Once you figure out the pattern, you get used to the pattern. But to me, this year, the pattern has been off, and I'm not the only one that's mentioned it. It's felt like it's been like a hold. We started 2024. Everything kind of felt fairly, the same until we got to 2024. And then it was like, okay, it's 2024. Let's get going on what we know we have to do. But every time I attempted to do what I saw I was supposed to do in 2024, it just wasn't working out, and it felt like it was a hold, Reminds me of that commercial, the car commercial, where the woman's like, hold, don't sell yet. And that's what it felt like. We were in this sort of waiting, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was like, why does it feel like we're not moving? We got the templates last year, but we're not going through them. And, we should be really far along in our 2024, and I don't know about everybody else, but I feel like I haven't really started it yet. And then I saw the last couple weeks about all the eclipses, and I'm like, okay, now I understand. Now I get why we've been waiting. Because of these big eclipses, to clear things out. So we have a quicker pace to 2024. We'll have to do it faster, but we won't have so much stuff in our way. So because of this kind of shift to the year, and this kind of different timeline in a way to the year, I wanted to focus a little bit on how we trap ourselves in these old realities and why the eclipses come in to push us out. Because a lot of people, eclipses used to be, for me, a really big deal. And when I say I didn't know they were coming up, I didn't even know. I don't pay attention to any of that stuff anymore. Full moon, new moon, I don't really pay attention to it. Unless I have something scheduled, and I'll always look to see if it's a full moon or something going on in that time. Or if I'm looking to see when something might completely phase out. When I know it's coming, if I want to pinpoint dates a little bit, I might look for that kind of astrology. Even though all that astrology is inside of our body and it's just projected out for us, once we start embodying that stuff in, it's not as big of a deal. And once we sort of move through our realities, you don't have these major shakeups like you do in your human form, in your human consciousness. In these eclipses, it doesn't happen that way anymore. You don't get the holy shit, it's an eclipse. because you're keeping your yard pretty clean. You know, you move out the realities, you close them out, you move on to the next one. You don't wait around. You're not procrastinating. You know when something's ending. You move on. You move through it. You move through the emotions. You keep going because you know that just holds you up. So we just keep going through it in that cadence. We keep going through it in that way. And by doing that, we don't really get as shaken up because you're not holding on to the old ones. And there's a lot of ways we hold on to old realities, right? We will kind of find ourselves trapped in them and what we feel like we're trapped in. So the eclipse comes in to completely just shake us out because we trap ourselves. And I want to make that very clear. When I use the word trapped in a reality, we trap ourselves. No one else is trapping us there. We double down ourselves. We trap ourselves there. We just nest in there. We don't want to move. No matter how the reality feels to us, we just don't want to move out of it. If we've come to some kind of alignment in the reality, even if it's not sustainable, right? It's almost like the seesaw, you know, and it's pivoting. It's on the pivot and it's kind of stable, so we're just going to hold. You know, I don't want to do anything else to mess it up. I don't want to tip it. I'm just going to keep it the way it is. But it's not sustainable in the long run because of different reasons. Whether you have a reality where you're investing so much time into a person, a job, a project, a pet, it doesn't matter what it is. Whatever the reality encompasses, whatever's in it. You will have time when you're in a reality and you're trying to align it to do that. You will have time. If it's someone you're supposed to have a relationship with, you will be granted the time to do that. It'll be that time for that reality. But when it's time for these realities to shift, a lot of times if we create a reality where we've kind of doubled down and we've made it kind of very cemented in a sense, even though they're really not, they're very easily uprooted. But our human thinks they're cemented because we can't move on them quickly. You know, for us it's cemented because we can't pull out the tent stakes, you know, and just move on to the next reality. We've kind of taken those tent stakes and put them in cement. So we have to have a real strong upheaval, i.e. the eclipses, to pull that tent out of there, the wind to pull it out. Because we kind of get ingrained in it. We don't really want it to move, so we'll start to go through a reality that's on that pivot because at that moment we have the time to put all the energy into it, but it won't always be that way. So when it starts to shift and oh my gosh, now I don't have the time to invest like I did before. Have I built a foundation in this reality that can shift with me? Is it pliable enough to align in a different plane? Can I move this? Can I upgrade it to a different frequency? Or is it so ingrained in that old one that I can't move it now? And that is how we was one way. There's a couple other ways. This is one way we'll trap ourselves kind of in there. Because we know it's not sustainable in the long term. I'm dealing with one now that I know is not sustainable in the long run of different realities I'm going to do. I can't sustain it. It's been exhausting to align it to this moment I'm in now, but it's not sustainable. And I know it's not. So I'm trying to now look at, I didn't want to use the word trying. It's what it feels like though. I'm starting to explore other upgrades to the reality now to make it more movable. You know, what can I do to make this to where, yeah, right now it works, but it's not going to work 4 months from now. It might not work 6 months from now. And in reality, it's probably not working that good now because it's taking too much energy into feeding it into one spot, right? And it's not really moving. It's not really going anywhere to continue to focus on that one thing. How can I make this more pliable? How can I make it where I can reshift it, rework it, get it to a different, so it can move with me instead of it trapping us to where then we get to the point where, okay, that job's got to go, the relationship's got to go. What can I do to make it more movable? Where am I entrenching it in? Where am I in a reality that is so constricting? One thing changes and this whole thing can't come with me. That's what you want to look at. We talk about trapping ourselves in because we will build them a certain way, and our human will build them, our higher aspects will build them. not realizing when you bring anything into a reality, it throws the whole reality off. So now we got to realign the whole thing again. And we'll get to these alignments where, okay, it's vibrationally aligned for now, but that's not going to be how it's going to be later on. I can't hold it. You know, there's not enough here. It's not a movable reality. And, you know, I'm going to use a couple examples. These are kind of minor examples, but it'll give you the gist. I've known this is an animal example, but because our realities will shift with animals so much because of their lifespan, because of different changes that go on during those lifespans of animals, and they are shorter than our lifespans for a reason, because animals are very locked into old realities. They're very ingrained in them, whether we had an animal when we were married, when we had an animal when we were single, we had an animal when our kids were young, and now the kids are in college. The animals tend to go with the timeline. So when you get to a change in the timeline, the animal will go. And we will hold on to the animal because we're trying to hold on to the timeline. And I see it over and over and over again. And one reason that's a good example is because we do have some type of choice there on how long we hold it until we can't hold it anymore. And then, but we can drag it out. You know, we can really drag it out. But if you have an animal you've trained, let's say you've had an animal that isn't trained to be a guard dog. You know, it's not trained to get along with other animals. It was trained to be a guard dog because in the reality you were in, that's how that reality was set up. It was not an animal that was to socialize with others. It was not an animal that you're going to take to a dog park and run it around. It wasn't meant to be in a subdivision where you're walking on a leash. And now you're there because now you're divorced. Now you've moved to a different area. Now you got married. And now all of a sudden that animal is now sitting in the middle of a residential area and it's not meant to be there. And trying to realign that, trying to shift that, it's very difficult to do. Because now we've set up a reality that was kind of structured one way and it didn't have the plausibility to move. It doesn't have the energy to go. So normally what will happen is we're going to learn very quickly the animal probably is going to have to go one way or the other because we've set him up to kind of be tied to that old timeline. And we can try to keep it around as long as possible, but a lot of times that doesn't work. I actually had a reality that went that way with an animal. It was someone else's animal, but I kind of witnessed the reality, kind of how it was constructed and how it started deconstructing. And I'm in a similar reality now with a different animal, and I'm starting to see how, you know, how can I shift it now? We always want to be living from the future in a sense. That way we're not shaken up when our reality shift. It's got to go with us. How can I make this go with us? And there's going to be some realities where you're going to look and know that's not supposed to go with me. I don't have to worry about shifting that because that's not coming with me. But how else can I set these things up, the ones I feel like are going to go with me? When we set anything up to only fit into one frequency, one reality, and we say, and I've heard it said so many times, oh, I'm never going to move. Oh, I'm never going to do any of those things. So all these things I have are fine. I can have 15, I can have 15 animals in this big house because I'm always going to live in this big house. And, we say these things. Or I can have all these expenses because I'm always going to have this job making, 6 figures. It doesn't matter. And then it shifts. And then everything starts to crumble because we haven't given it any breath. We haven't given it any space to shift. We've doubled down. We've entrenched it in kind of one frequency and we can't move it. And it has to go. Because we have to go. We have to go into the next frequency. We have to go into the next upgrade. Even at the time, it doesn't feel like an upgrade. It feels like I'm going backwards. To our human, it'll feel like we're going backwards. To our higher self, we're moving on to something more soul aligned. But to get to that, we have to work through all of our programming and human shit to get to the soul aligned stuff. Because we can't take that stuff with us. Which means some of our realities after our human realities start to fade. Or the human realities that are aligned with human consciousness start to fade. They feel like they're a downgrade. They feel like we fucked it up somehow. And this is just a big old fat mess. I don't know what to do. This is just a complete category 5 hurricane. What am I supposed to do here? Because they don't look the way we thought they were going to look. Some stuff can't come with us. And the more we try to And also, a lot of times we will be taking a reality and trying to, it's not making us 100% happy. None of these human realities are. Even higher line realities for a time start to shift, and they're not giving us the same inspiration they were before. And it's not like the human realities where we feel like we're missing something. We're just not as inspired. We're ready for the shift to the next reality. But we really have to look at how much baggage have we created to bring with us. Our human will always bring the baggage because we want the baggage to weigh us down or we don't move. We have the excuse to not go. Oh, my kid's in school here. I can't pull the kids out of school. I can't leave this job because I have 18,000 projects and I'm just too important to this job. Whatever our story is, your universe will show you very quickly that's all bullshit, it's all story. If you got to move, you're going to move. You know, when it's your time to shift, you're going to shift. And if that stuff can't come with you because it's not pliable enough, it's not been constructed that way, then it will be gone and we will move on. You know, the kids will be pulled out of school. The kids will, all these things will happen. It will just be in a much rougher way than if we just go with the flow of the realities as they shift. And look for stuff that we are like, ugh, that could be a sticking point later. You know, this might be an issue. This might not be able to go as smoothly as I would like it to go. We start to identify those things that in their current frequency cannot come with us. And if we want them to make the shift, we have to start shifting them now. We have to upgrade them. We have to look at them and say, okay, let me be honest with myself. Can this come? Is it supposed to? Am I trying to hold on and trying to shift into something it's not? We don't want to do that either. We don't want to try to bring something along and drag something with us that doesn't want to be there. I see that a lot with people holding on to pets too long. Pet's not supposed to come, but we're going to drag it along with us as long as we can because we don't want to let it go. There's a lot of that goes into really the construction and deconstruction of these realities, and that's what the eclipse will show us. It'll show you the sticking points. It's going to show you what can't go in its current iteration. Does not mean we can't shift it. It does not mean we can either. It depends on what it is. It depends on who else is in the reality. It depends on if we're supposed to. And we really have to go inside and check with ourselves on that. Is this supposed to come? Am I just doing all this to then, you know, maybe someone else is supposed to take this animal, someone else is supposed to take this vehicle, someone else is going to take this job one day. What is it exactly? Someone else is going to, you know, take the boyfriend or take the girlfriend because it's not supposed to stay with me. It's going to go somewhere. They're all going to go somewhere else at some point. We really want to be honest about it and look at if we're trying to kind of double down and trap ourselves somewhere where to move, because we're never really trapped. It's like that tarot card. I can't remember what it is. It's the Five of Swords. I don't remember. Where she's kind of not really tied up. She's surrounded by the swords and she could walk. She's blindfolded, but really not really. She could walk out at any time, but she feels so constrained. Because our human will constrain itself. And it has so many stories about why we can't move it. Why we can't just walk away. Why we can't move through the reality. When we clearly can, we just believe we can't. And that's what happens. We create so much baggage. We create so much noise. We don't believe we can move through it. When we 100% can move through it. And that's what the eclipse is going to show us. That, no, none of this shit is set. I don't care if we cement it. We can put a weight on top of that shit. When it's time for it to go, it's going to go. If it can't move with us, it won't. And that's that. You know, and that's the way it is. And that's what we learn after a while, to start to really hone in on these sticky parts of these realities and the parts that aren't smooth, that are going to have. And that's why I will kind of look at something and say, okay, is this temporarily trying to get aligned? Or is once this thing aligned, how much maintenance is it to keep this up? And can I keep this up long term? Or is this going to have to go by the wayside? Because yeah, I might have 5 hours a day to dedicate to this now, but in a year from now, I'm not going to have 5 hours a day, or I'm not going to be home all day long to take care of this thing. I won't be in that reality anymore. So take a look at those sticky parts. Take a look at where we're trying to kind of ingrain ourselves in a reality and feel like we are invulnerable to the shift, because we're not. And that's when we talk about things collapsing and getting really pulled apart, because we make it have to be pulled apart because we just don't want to leave it. You know, so it's important to really be able to identify those realities and see where we're trapping ourselves and why we're trapping ourselves there. And most of the time we look at these realities and say, they're not even that awesome. Why do I want to trap myself here? But we have a lot of emotional baggage. We have a lot of story with it. We will trap ourselves with the story so many times. You know, even if the reality is long gone, we will still be talking about it, and we will still be identifying with it. We will still have an identity to being a survivor of that. We will still have an identity for being a victim to that. We keep tying ourselves back to older realities by the frequency of the story. You know, we don't want the shift to occur. Because when the shift occurs, technically that never happened in the new frequency we're in now. When we shift a frequency, that never happened. Yesterday I was doing something and I went to go to my phone and I forgot my PIN. And I've had the same PIN for probably, I don't know, eight years. I use this number I dreamed about. It has no identification to anything else, you know, and it's just a number I dreamed about once. I use it for everything. Couldn't remember what the hell it was. And I tried 30 times to get in my phone, and I finally just said, screw it. I'm gonna go to sleep. And I don't know what I'm gonna do. I have no idea. It was just gone. And I've never experienced it to that extent, to where the memory was completely gone. I didn't try to remember. I said, if I'm supposed to remember, I guess I'll remember it the next day. And that was it. And actually, when I woke up this morning, I remembered what it was. And I was able to get back in my phone. But sometimes it's for us to kind of detach from the phone for a while, detach from technology for a while. But you will find memories go. And when we try to really hone in and pull these memories back, they'll come back if you need them, to tell a story, to teach. But when we try to remember, we're now trying to lock back in. We're trying to take, it's like taking a, what do they call them? Anchor on a ship, and anchor back into some old reality with a memory and try to recall it when we've forgotten it. Like, I can't remember, you know, did that happen? Did I ever eat at that restaurant? I don't remember. I don't think I did, but someone would say, oh yeah, you ate there. Here are pictures of you eating there. I'm like, I have any memory of that ever occurring. Technically, I had no memory of the dream of the number I was using for my phone, because technically in the reality I shifted into, I had never had that dream. I didn't know what the number was. And I mean, completely forgot. Couldn't remember if it was a 5-digit code. I'm like, wait, is my phone a 4-digit? I have no idea. Absolutely zippo idea. I had no idea. So this is going to start happening, especially when you shift. And we try to remember. We try to just grab back into something. We are trapping ourselves back into it. We're bringing all that stuff forward again. We're repeating history in a sense. You know, there's that old adage, if you don't know your history, you're going to repeat it. There is a sense of higher consciousness, universal language to that. In a sense of, I'm going to be aware of something that has happened with a person before. I'm going to be aware of how I acted, the program I did. But I'm more not focusing on the person as I'm focusing on how I set the tone for that previous reality. And am I going to set that same tone again? To then relive the reality again. Because if I can still set that same tone, I'm also tuning back to that same frequency. I'm looping right back into that same reality because I haven't shifted anything. No one else can shift in a reality if you don't shift. You're the catalyst to the shift. If you're not shifting, nothing's changing till the eclipses, and then all the shit will go haywire. And we're going to see a lot of shit start to go haywire. And a lot of things you're not going to remember. And there are a lot of things that you're going to try to remember. A lot of identity we had to these stories. And the stories are another big thing that trap us. It's not just the physical things we build around us. It's the memories. It's how we felt about it. If we felt slighted, if we felt like, oh, yeah, I remember that reality. Now, that doesn't mean you won't reminisce. That's a little different energy to reminiscing. We reminisce right before we shift, because we know when we shift, we might not remember any of it. So it's almost like watching a movie, and it doesn't even really feel like we ever really experienced it. Watching someone else's movie. And when I reminisce about something, I know I'm about to shift again, because I very rarely do that. You find the more you go through your ascension process, the less and less you are attached to any of the physical stuff. It just doesn't matter. And before, as humans, we made decisions based on all of our physical stuff. You know, we made decisions based on all the stuff around us. And what kind of starts to shift is, and it does completely shift when you get to certain parts of ascension, is we don't give a shit about any of that stuff anymore. I don't base a decision based on anything physical because I won't give a shit about that in another maybe month, maybe 2 months, maybe 5 minutes. I'm not going to care about that armchair. I'm not going to care about any of that car. I'm not going to care about it. So it doesn't matter. Why would I'm not going to make any choice based on that thing. Whereas before, as humans, we do. We make decisions based on the physical things around us. We make decisions to keep jobs, to keep the physical things. We make decisions to spend money to keep people in our lives, to stay in a certain area, to live in a certain place, to buy certain things. But the shift happens, and then it can take years for this to fully entrench in. These realizations to fully entrench in, where you realize, my God, I made so many decisions based on shit. I don't have any of it. So many stuff based on furniture. I don't have any of that stuff anymore. None of it. I don't have any of it. Completely all gone. When I made my last move, I gave everything away. I was like, I don't want to keep any of this stuff. It's all tied to old timelines. What are we keeping that when you look at it, you immediately remember an old timeline? I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a purse that was given to you by a boyfriend, whether it was a chair your grandmother had. It doesn't matter what it is. It technically is tying you to that timeline. If it's incestual in some way, you know, it's a karma to that. And it doesn't mean you can't keep it. It just means we don't want to have the cord. When we have the attachment to it, and we have the cord of attachment to us that puts us right back in that reality, especially when we're talking about, I mean, I meet so many people that keep things and talk forever about people who've been dead for 50, 60, 60 years ago. And they're still so wrapped up in the person and so wrapped up in the stuff and so wrapped up in the story. And it's 60 years past. And it seems ludicrous to a lot of us, but we all will do the same thing. It might not be 60 years ago, but we can be so wrapped up in a story that was 2 years ago. There's no difference between 6 years ago and 2 years ago. Our human will see it as a difference because of the span of time, but to our higher aspects, to our soul, there's no difference in that. We're still hung up on something that's not happening right now, so who really gives a shit about any of that? It doesn't matter. Technically, in this moment, none of it happened. It does not matter. So we will appear to be kind of cold about that stuff, non-sentimental, not caring about it. And it's not so much we don't care about it, we just don't have an identity to it. We have no... It can all go away and it doesn't matter. If it's there, fine. And that's how we start to get with our realities. If it's there, fine. But we also have to build the realities, which is going to circle back to how I started. We have to build the realities around, if it's there, fine, but it doesn't have to be. But I also don't want to lock something in to where it can only exist in one form. It can only exist in one vibration. It can only exist in one frequency. Because now I've locked that thing into a reality that when I shift, it can't come. Because I've locked it in. For whatever reason. Because I don't want to deal with it. That's a big one. You know, we will lock stuff into a reality because I don't want to deal with having to align that shit. I don't want to have to talk to that person. I don't want to have to go through that. I don't want to have to, you know, deal with everything going on right now. I just don't want to have to do it. So I'm going to let it just sit there. And eventually, you know, it'll just eventually pitter out on its own. We're just not okay with it pittering out on its own because we haven't technically dealt with it. And because we haven't dealt with it, we have all the emotions about letting the stuff, resolving it, and just letting these realities go. So these eclipses come through to kind of show us very glaringly what's a sticking point, show us very glaringly what we're attached to, show us very glaringly what can't come with us. And I know I said earlier that it felt like the year was slow, you know, like we were waiting to get to this point. Now we're going to go, you know, as soon as these eclipses clear, which they've already started, but as soon as we get clear of this energy, we're going to go quicker because we won't have any of the older baggage slowing us down. So we'll do it faster. And then we have 2025 templates that are going to be coming in, you know, very soon too. So we'll be doing both at the same time. So the year is about to get a lot busier. Now, I say that, and it depends on where you are in your process as to what busier is going to mean. Is it clearing busier? Is it, aligning busier? Aligning your realities busier? Is it just upgrading your body busier? Is it detoxing your body busier? It depends on where you're at. But it's about to uptick. But for a lot of people, in a very shaked up kind of way. And a lot of the collectives in a very, very shook up kind of way. So, all right. I think I've kind of exhausted this. I'm trying to think of any other ways, anything else I can bring in. I'm going to check my questions quick to see if I have anything. Okay. I think I'm going to leave it at that. And I will be on live a little bit more in the next week or so, just because of the eclipses and to provide support for that. But really look at where we're trapping ourselves. Because remember, we are the ones that are walling ourselves in. We do it every time. We do it in a majority of different ways. And it's kind of funny how we do it and how we will kind of double down. Let me double down on this reality that's not even that happy, but I'm really going to just entrench in here. It reminds me of a cat scratching in a litter box, like, oh, I'm really going to nest in here. Let me just get in here. Because I don't want to have to leave it. And if I dig myself so much physical shit to work through, I won't be able to leave. But we quickly learn that's not the case. It's just a much more devastating to our human process to get extracted from them. So, okay. That was a little bit of a bummer note to leave on, but okay. I will see everyone next time. Look at where we're trapped. Really take a look at how we constructed the realities, and do they have, really feel into what I want to say, malleability of the reality we've created. And is it malleable? Can we transform it? Can we pull it apart? Can we reconstruct it a different way? Can I put the energy in now to do that when I have the time to now pull it apart and reconstruct it? Or do I leave it the way it is? No, it's tethering, it's just on that seesaw. And if one thing changes, the whole thing collapses. It's like Jenga, let me pull out if I keep pulling out parts, which your reality is going to continue to always be pulled out and reconstructed, the minute our higher aspects, our soul, we start letting it start to pull out parts, is that going to collapse? Does it have any sustainability? Is it supposed to? Is it just a stopping point, And I'm not supposed to. It's just going to here now. I've had some like that too, where I was like, oh, I'm spending all my time with this person now because I was doing a lot of clearing and I was supposed to do that. But long term, none of that was going to go, and it wasn't supposed to. They were going to go off and do stuff. I was going to go off and do stuff. It wasn't supposed to come. But there are some things that you will be building to kind of come with you, and we really want to look at that stuff and see. Okay. I'll see everyone next time.